How can you create eye-pleasing cinematic B-roll footage easily? Today I'm going to walk you through how I use some pretty simple techniques on how to capture a really pleasing set of B-roll that I use for a documentary that we just finished. Now, if you've ever seen a documentary or produced a documentary, then you know that the bulk of the information comes from the subject matter experts, or the meat of the film is the content that's coming from the subject matter experts. But no one wants to look at a bunch of talking heads for an hour. So you need B-roll. Now, I've said before how I am a huge fan of Floyd Russ's work and how he uses these intimate shots to really bring the audience into the world of the subject. And so I wanted to use this style in one of my own client projects. Now, granted, this really depends on whether or not this style is right for you, but if it is, then stick around and let me show you how I got these 4 shots and how you can do the same. Okay, I'll start off by saying that 98% of this film was shot on the Sigma FP in Cinema DNG RAW. These are Canon FDs, and I have the 50, I have the 35, and I have a 24, sorry. I shot most of the film on the 24 and the 35, and I think I used the 50 for just a few shots, not many. On my lenses, I always attach a small rig matte box. I don't just use my matte box for looks, and I know that there are a lot of people out there, they're like, oh, just get a matte box because it makes you look really official. Let's figure out how we can make our projects look better. Inside, I attach a 4x5.6 filter, and this particular filter is a Black Pro Mist. This one is the quarter strength, and I use it to kind of take off the sharpness and give the image a little bit of bloom, especially when you look at the highlights. Now, these are more expensive than the screw-on filters, but I do like the fact that, you know, they come with these rings, and so they'll fit on almost any size lens that you need. And you have the benefit of blocking out light leaks, obviously with this little barn door. I never shoot without it. And so that's what I was shooting with, the Sigma FP. These lenses had the Black Pro Mist filter on the lenses. Now let's talk about the lighting and the locations. So the first of the 4 shots that I'm going to show you is this outdoor shot. So a little bit of a backstory, and then these shots probably will make a little more sense. The film is about the first African-American firefighter in the city of Houston and his journey on how he got there, the people who helped him get there, things like that. So what I wanted to capture was these personal, intimate looks that communicate everyday life, you know, for him. Let the audience see his eyes, you know, bring the audience into his world and see him as a person, you know, at the age of 95. Now, when we talk about some of these B-roll shots, I think it's important to go in knowing what kind of camera motion you want to have when you're capturing these shots. This one in particular, I wanted to have him outside and pretty much use like a handheld look. So I mounted the camera, the Sigma FP, on a shoulder rig that I have. It's like a little cheap $99 shoulder rig. And I was able to get a, what I would call like a steady handheld look. I shot the medium shot on the 35mm lens, and I shot the wide shot on the 24mm lens. And I remember picking this shot up. It was really fast. We were only out there for a few minutes. If you look, you'll notice that we are out around magic hour or sunset, and you can kind of tell that by looking at some of the lighting in the background, and you can even see the dominant direction that the sunlight is coming from on his face. Plus, you can see it in the trees in the background, the leaves. In these situations, I usually bring in a negative fill. I have a 4x4 black negative fill, and I would have put it on this side of his face to help give some contrast. The only reason I didn't do that was because of the hat that he's wearing, and the hat in itself is creating contrast on his face in this area. Also, on outside shots, I usually bring in a diffusion panel. So whether it's a 4x4 panel, whether it's a big 8x8 sheet, whether it's 6x6 sheet, I usually do that to help soften the sunlight. But there is a point in when you're shooting outside that you can kind of get away from that. When the sun starts to get lower than the trees, when the sun starts to get lower than some of the buildings, if you have tall buildings around or houses around, then you get this nice directional but ambient lighting that is very soft. That was pretty much it on how we captured this shot, and when we put this in for the color grade, it came out beautiful. So on to the next one. Okay, the next shot is him sitting in his living room, really just sitting there, being comfortable, being in his element, in his home, just kind of relaxing. The camera motion for this one, and actually for the next three, was when I put the camera on a slider and just a really slow, subtle push-in. Push-ins, this type of shot is one of my absolute favorite shots because they are simple, yet they are very, very powerful. I wanted to shoot a wide shot where I really started adding layers. He's in, as you can see, he's in kind of close to the wall. There's a window behind him. There's a door that I opened intentionally in front of him. There is a chair here, and then there's a wall, which adds depth, which adds interest, which helps you also to create more depth in your lighting. This was shot on the 25 with a one light setup, and that was the Aputure 120D. I staged it right here off camera left behind the wall so you couldn't see it. I diffused it with a small softbox. I put the grid on the softbox so that wasn't splashing all over the wall, and then I aimed it towards the talent's face. If you look closely, you'll see that there is light leaking in from the door outside. And then obviously one of the main points of interest is the window with the shears. There's a nice reflection on the ground here that adds interest, and all of that natural sunlight is kind of subtly lifting the ambience of the room. I didn't use any other lights in the scene. Everything else was turned off. For the medium shot, was pretty much the same thing. I just moved that light a little closer to create a softer effect. And with the medium shot, you can kind of shape the light a little bit more. So I added some black panels to kind of skirt off the light from hitting this side of the room. And then I made sure that I tried to shape the light on his face just a little bit so that it was a little more pleasing to look at. Another thing that worked out really nice that I noticed was outside of that window where he had some hedges, some bushes, and it was a really windy day. And just the placement of the sun and the hedges of the bushes created these moments where the sunlight was going in and out of view of the camera. And I just thought that added a little more interest to the scene. One more thing that I'll say before we go on to the next shot is when you're using these dollies, sometimes your motion isn't perfect. And what I mean by that is you might have a little bit of wobble, just a little bit of instability with your dollies. Utilize warp stabilization. In these situations, I use warp stabilization. As long as it's very, very subtle shaking or subtle movement, you can use warp stabilization, and it makes the shot come out perfect. So just a little tip on how to get these really smooth looking shots. This next shot, this was a fun one. And I have to be honest, when I was shooting this on the day of the interview, I did not know how this shot would look or whether or not it would turn out right and if it would be usable, but I'm glad that it was usable and it did turn out right. And so essentially this was, after we shot his interviews, I said, don't go anywhere. There's the shot that I want to try, right? And so I got my hazing machine. The premise was he's a firefighter, and so I got my hazing machine. I'm gonna bring out this smoke while he's sitting there. He's just gonna look at the camera, and it's gonna be just this genius shot while I'm pushing in and the smoke is coming up and it's starting to fill the room, and he's sitting there in heroic fashion, doing a lot. And it kind of worked, and I think it worked out that way. Maybe not everything that I just described there, but I do think that it worked out. It's a pretty cool shot. I shot this on the 35 and put it on the dolly. I changed the frame rate to 59 frames per second because I wanted that smoke I knew I wanted this to be like a slow motion shot. I was gonna slow it down in post-production. Now on this one, I had one shot because if I was gonna haze up this room, it would have taken a long time to let that haze dissipate. And what I mean a long time, right? So you're talking about maybe having to wait 20 to 30 minutes before kind of like it's all gone. And we didn't have that amount of time. This location was rented, so I knew that I had really one shot. So what I did was I rehearsed the camera movement. I let the talent know exactly what he was going to be doing, which was really just sitting there, just holding that pose, looking right at the lens. I let everyone else know what we would be doing so that we could just pull off this shot. I got this idea I was watching a documentary on by the New York Times, and they had these really cool shots where these papers were falling, and I thought, man, that's a really interesting way to add B-roll to a film. So I knew I had this project coming up, and I kind of banked that idea and said I may try a shot similar to this. If I can get it to fit my project, I may try a similar shot like this. The lighting in this one was really the top-down lighting, which was kind of the same thing that we had for the interview itself, so I didn't have to change much. And the only other light was a small light on the left side of his face, just to help fill in and give a little more of a three-dimensional look. So this is what the shot looked like after all the haze, after the room was hazed up. And as you can see, like I said, really gonna have to wait a long time for all this stuff to dissipate. Everyone would have been sitting around waiting. Quite frankly, my time would have been out and we would have had to leave the location. So had one shot, it worked out, thank God. When we screened the film, this was one of the shots that someone sitting in the theater actually complimented us on, saying that they really liked it. So this one worked out well. If you haven't seen the film, you need to go watch the film. Go watch the movie so you can see some of these shots in the movie. And now for the last shot, which was have him moving to a different setup, which was his bedroom. We had him sitting on his bed. We had him put on one of his firefighter shirts that he had when he served. And again, he hired in at 27. We shot this in 95, so this is a very old shirt. He was still able to fit the shirt, so we had him put the shirt on and just sit on his bed and look at the camera with a really nice, slow push in. So same equipment, the dolly, same lighting. It's the same Aputure 120D lighting. This window serves as a huge point of interest and adds dynamic to the scene. And again, he had the shears that soften the light. Now, shears are a great way of bringing down the ambient that's coming from light that's on the outside. And they're just really soft. Shears are really nice and pleasing to look at, and they're practical. One of the amazing things, just really amazing things about his location was he had these shears already up on the wall. We didn't have to set dress any of this stuff. He already had it. Now, I knew that before we shot. I had an opportunity to come by his house and take a look at his location. And if he didn't have it, then I was probably going to have to bring in something like that. But since he already had it, it was just less equipment that we had to pack. It was less setup that we had to do before we were ready to shoot. This one was on the 35. I just like the way the 35mm looks, especially on a full frame camera. So that was pretty much it. The one light setup, the window light on the outside. I did not add a backlight or a kicker light or a rim light in this case because I like the way this shot looked as it was. Simple yet effective ways of shooting cinematic B-roll footage for your projects and ways to level up your project. Until next time, be blessed, stay inspired, and always shoot for the difference. Check out some of the stuff that we have going on at the channel. We want to stick around on YouTube for a very long time, and we need your help to do that. So do me a favor and subscribe, like, comment, and share, and we will keep creating great content. Thanks.